Hello everybody, this is your Shruthi Maam, and today we're going to do this warm-up session on human reproduction. Now the speciality of this session is that you don't need big textbooks and big paragraphs for you to remember everything in this chapter. Whether you are starting now or you have already finished this chapter, this particular section I am going to teach you everything in this chapter in tabulated form, in flowchart form with diagrams, such that easily you will be able to remember. And let's say you're walking into the exam hall or you just want to take a quick revision, you just need to go through the slides or watch this session once and you are sorted. Okay, so no wasting of time, no nonsense in between, just what you need for your exam and everything that's important in this chapter, guys. So like this, we will be doing warm up for each and every chapter in your syllabus, so definitely do subscribe our channel if you still have not done it. Okay, and also do join our WhatsApp community. I will show you the QR code. Now using this, you can join our community and you will be getting all of these notes for free, and this will definitely help you for your revision in the last minute before your exam and for you to prepare when you are studying for your exams. Okay, so let's start off with the human reproduction, everybody. So firstly, in this particular chapter, we have to start off with the anatomy of the male reproductive system, the female reproductive system. Then we will start off with the events of reproduction, which will start with gametogenesis, which is making of the gametes, the sperm and the egg, and then how fertilization is taking place, and the post-fertilization events, which involves the implantation, the pregnancy, the childbirth, and everything until the lactation. Okay, so let's start off with the anatomy of the male reproductive system. So firstly, the primary sex organ of the reproductive system is the testis. Okay, so remember that the testis is the main organ that will produce the male gamete, which is the sperms. Okay, and also they will secrete some male hormones which will regulate the process of sperm production as well as give the males the secondary sexual characteristics. Okay, now this particular testis is situated outside the abdominal cavity. Why? Because that lower temperature is important for the process of spermatogenesis. Clear? So this pouch-like structure in which the testis is placed outside the body is known as the scrotum. Alright, now inside the testis, if you see, it is further divided into many lobes, and into each of these lobes we can find 2 to 3 small coiled, supercoiled tubules, which we call as seminiferous tubules. Now these tubules are the place where the exact sperm production is going to take place. Alright, now this particular seminiferous tubule has importantly 2 kinds of cells, the spermatogonia and the Sertoli cells. Now the spermatogonia is again the main cell inside the seminiferous tubule where my process of spermatogenesis is going to happen. So this is the main cell that will divide, undergo meiosis and produce our haploid gametes or the sperms. Okay, now the Sertoli cells are other elongated cells. Okay, so now if you see inside the tubule, we can find the spermatogonium that is dividing and producing the sperms. Now we have some slightly elongated cells, okay, in between these spermatogonia called the Sertoli cells, who will actually help in nourishing and developing the sperms. Okay, so when we are studying the process, you will clearly understand the role of Sertoli cells. Alright, now when you look at the seminiferous tubules, inside the seminiferous tubules we have this structure, but inside the lobes just next to these seminiferous tubules we will have some small cells called as the Leydig cells or the interstitial cells. Okay, so the interstitial cells are going to be secreting some hormones. Okay, these hormones are not only important for spermatogenesis but also for giving the secondary sexual characters in male. Okay, so this is all about your testis. Now once the sperms have been produced and they are released from the seminiferous tubules, we need a series of ducts that will carry this sperm and take it to the outside. So these series of ducts include firstly the retitestis. So right from outside the seminiferous tubule to the outside, it's going to be the retitestis. Now from the retitestis To bring the sperms outside of the testis, we need the vasa efferentia. And right outside the testis on the posterior side, we have a supercoiled structure which we call as epididymis. So vasa efferentia connects the retitestis to the epididymis. Now the epididymis is the place where the sperms will be stored and they will mature until the ejaculation. Alright, now from the epididymis we have one long tube which we call as the vas deferens, and this is what will take the sperms up into the abdomen, and in the abdomen it will loop over the urinary bladder, and there we have a small gland which we call as a seminal vesicle. Now this seminal vesicle has a particular duct coming out, and this vas deferens will go fuse with that duct and form a common duct known as the ejaculatory duct. Now this ejaculatory duct will carry the sperms, will carry the secretion from the gland and join it to the urethra. Now this urethra is the one who will help the semen in exiting the body. Now it is the common duct that will carry both the urine as well as the semen. So therefore it is called as the urinogenital duct. Okay, so in males, urethra is the single duct that will transport both the urine as well as the semen from outside the body. Okay, clear? Now coming to the glands. Why do we need glands? That is because when you look at the sperms, once they are deposited into the female's reproductive system, they are into a completely different environment and they will have to survive until they reach the egg. So in order to nourish them and protect them, all these secretions from the glands are important. So firstly, the seminal vesicle, which I just told you, situated just below the bladder, just close to the bladder. Now these are paired glands that will contribute to almost 70% of the entire seminal plasma, and this has a lot of fructose which is mainly meant for giving nourishment to the sperms. And then just below the urinary bladder we have a prostate gland, which is an unpaired gland. Okay, and this contributes about 20 to 25% of the entire seminal plasma. Now this also has calcium enzymes, again meant for nourishing the sperms and helping them travel in the female's reproductive tract. Then we have the bulbourethral glands that is located under the prostate gland, and this particular bulbourethral glands are paired in nature. Okay, and they secrete a mucus which will help to lubricate the penis during the process of copulation. Okay, now once the sperms are deposited into the female's tract, they will climb up the female's reproductive system and go to the fallopian tube where they can potentially make the egg. Okay, so the external genitalia which is meant to deposit the sperm into the female's reproductive tract is the penis. Okay, and is used for insemination, which is nothing but deposition of the sperm in the female's reproductive tract. Clear, everybody? So this is the sectional view of the male reproductive system. Mostly you will not be asked to draw this in your board exams. Okay, so usually this is the diagram that is asked. So definitely do practice this diagram, and with the tabulated column you have all the parts that are important for you. So you can always just practice with the labeling so that you don't make a mess in your paper when you have to draw it. Okay, so too much of shading, extra effects, okay, all that is not required. Just make sure you are to the point, showing what is required and what is relevant to your labeling. Okay, so once you have this entire diagram sorted, even a 5-mark question will be super easy for you to answer. Clear, everybody? Now when you see the sectional view of the seminiferous tubule, again you may not have to draw this to the point, but yes, when we talk about spermatogenesis, you will now know the different kinds of cells, the different stages of cells that are there before the sperm is produced. So you can just practice one sectional diagram which will involve the Sertoli cells, okay, and some of the spermatogonia. So that much if you draw, it is more than enough, and you can label each stage of the spermatogenesis in case it is asked. Okay, and then up until the sperm you can label it. Okay, so this diagram also is important for your exam perspective, but then labeling and all too much they might not ask from this because this is too much of a sectional microscopic view that we are seeing. Clear, everybody? Now coming to the female's reproductive system. See how easy it was. Within just 3 to 4 slides we have completed the entire male reproductive system, and this will be super useful when you are revising for your exams, guys. Okay. Now coming to the female's reproductive system, the main sex organ here, the primary sex organ here is the ovaries, okay, and this is what is going to produce the ova along with the female hormones. Now in the case of males, it was the androgens and mainly the testosterone that the Leydig cells are producing. In the females, it's going to be estrogen and progesterone. Okay, now when I teach you follicular development, when I teach you menstrual cycle, I'll clearly teach you how the different hormones work in different phases of the menstrual cycle. Okay, now when you look at the ovaries, now in the ovaries we have a central part called as the medulla and then the peripheral part called as the cortex. Now in the medulla you will have blood vessels, nerves and connective tissue that's present, and in the cortex is where you will find the growing follicles, okay, and the egg, the main oocyte, the main egg will be seen in the cortex. Okay, now from the ovary, once my egg is released through the process of what we call ovulation, once the egg is released, somebody has to pick it up and bring it to the uterus, correct? So once the egg is thrown out, we have the fallopian tube, which is the main duct that will collect the egg and take it to the uterus. Now in this fallopian tube, we have three parts, okay? Firstly, we have the infundibulum. So infundibulum has small finger-like projections, which we call as the fimbriae. Now this fimbriae will help in taking the egg once it is released. Now once the egg is picked up, through this funnel-shaped infundibulum, it is led into a slightly broad or a wide region which we call as the ampulla. This is the region where fertilization will occur. So ampulla of the fallopian tube is where fertilization would occur if in case the sperm also reaches the fallopian tube at the same time. Alright, now from the ampulla there is a small narrow part that will connect this tube to the uterus, which we call as the isthmus. Alright, now the uterus is nothing but an inverted pear shaped sac-like structure. This is where implantation will take place and this is where the embryo will grow. Now to the uterus we have three important layers. Firstly, we have the perimetrium, which is the thin outer wall, okay, that is the like a covering to the uterus. Then in between we have a thick myometrium, which is a smooth muscle layer. So this is what will induce contractions and help in childbirth. Okay, and the innermost layer is the endometrium. This is the glandular layer, and this is what will thicken and degenerate in every cycle and undergo cyclic changes in the body, which we call as the menstrual cycle. Okay, and this is the main layer that will support the embryo also during its development. Okay, so perimetrium, myometrium and the endometrium. So remember that endometrium is the most important layer where changes are happening, implantation is happening, supporting of the embryo is happening, everything is happening. Clear everyone? Now coming to below the uterus, we have a small opening called as the cervix. Okay, this is a narrow portion and this will open out into the vagina. Now there is a small canal that will go between the cervix. Now this particular canal along with the vagina together will form what we call as the birth canal. Okay, now this passage between the uterus and the vagina is nothing but the cervical canal, and this will allow the entry of sperms and allow the menstrual flow to exit as well. Now the vagina is a tubular structure and this is what will receive the sperms during copulation, and this will also serve as a birth canal during the childbirth. Alright. Now with this we also have to study the female's external genitalia. So talking about external genitalia, there are 5 portions in the female's external genitalia. Firstly, there is a mos pubis, which is a fatty cushion layer covered with pubic hair, and this is located above the vaginal opening. Okay, now under the mos pubis there are 2 fleshy folds of skin which we call labia majora and the labia minora, and just at the junction of the labia minora we have a small erectile structure which is called as a clitoris. Now covering the vaginal orifice or the vaginal opening, we have a small membrane that will partially cover the opening, which is called as the hymen. Now earlier it used to be taken as an indicator of virginity, but now we know that this particular hymen can break because of various other reasons and need not be an indicator of virginity. Okay, now when you talk about the female's reproductive system, along with all the organs, the ducts, as well as the external genitalia. You also have to discuss the mammary glands, because all female mammals have this particular feature of nourishing the young ones soon after birth. Okay, so the mammary glands have both fatty tissue and glandular tissue. This glandular tissue is further divided into small sac-like structures called as the alveoli. Now this is the one that will actually secrete the milk. Now from there are certain mammary ducts, okay, mammary tubules, mammary ducts, mammary ampulla, which will bring the milk to the outside. Okay, now when you look at the diagram of the mammary glands, okay, before I go into the structure, yes, when you look at the mammary gland, you may not be asked to draw this diagram, don't worry, but if you look at the passage of milk, that is really important. Starting from the mammary lobe, we have the mammary duct, the ampulla, lactiferous duct opening out into the nipple. So the flow of milk is extremely important to remember. Okay, so that's it about the female reproductive system. Now this is the sectional view of your female reproductive system. Again, this is for your reference and learning. You may not be asked to draw this particular diagram, but this diagram definitely you should be practicing. Okay, so along with the diagram, please practice the labeling also. Now when you see on the paper, it might feel very easy and you might be thinking, okay, I mean, I remember the diagram, I'll go and draw. But the problem is when you actually put it down in paper, so many labelings, so many structures, you might make a mess. Okay, so in order to prevent this mess from happening, please do practice. சரியா பசங்களா? ஸோ டயக்ராம்ஸ் உங்கள் ஆன்சரில் ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டண்ட்டான ஒரு பாகம். ஸோ டெஃபினட்டாக அதை வந்து ஸ்கிப் பண்ணாமல் ப்ராக்டிஸ் பண்ணிக்கோங்க. Clear everybody? Okay, so idoda we are done with the female reproductive system as well. So once we know the anatomy of the males and the females, now we have to talk about the spermatogenesis. Okay, so gametogenesis is nothing but producing the gametes. Okay, now when I say producing the gametes, in males it's going to be spermatogenesis, in females it is going to be oogenesis. Okay, so where does it happen? It happens in the primary sex organ, which is the testis. Spermatogenesis happens in the testis. Inside the testis, in the seminiferous tubules. Which cell is going to undergo this division? Spermatogonia. So spermatogonia is again a diploid cell, and this diploid cell further divides and differentiates to what we call the primary spermatocyte. So far no meiosis has happened, they are still diploid. Now this primary oocyte, primary spermatocyte will undergo the first meiotic division, and it will produce the secondary spermatocyte. Now the first meiosis is always reduction division, so there is only haploid number of cells present here. Okay, now secondary spermatocyte will undergo the second meiosis, and we will have 4 spermatids that are produced, who are all haploid. Now this spermatid is a normal cell which will then transform to a mature spermatozoa through a process known as spermiogenesis. Now for this spermiogenesis only Sertoli cells are going to help. Clear everybody? Now the number of chromosomes in the sperms, if you see, is 23. Starting spermatogonia and primary spermatocyte will have 46, but it will reduce from the secondary spermatocyte itself to haploid nature, or 23 chromosomes. Okay, now if you look at the key hormones that are involved, firstly we have the GnRH. Okay, so that is the releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. It will tell the pituitary to release LH and FSH. FSH is going to act on the Sertoli cells, and Sertoli cells are going to help in spermiogenesis. Now the LH is going to act on the Leydig cells, and this will produce the testosterone, it will produce the other androgen, and as a result our entire spermatogenesis, ducts, glands, everything will be maintained smoothly. Okay, now this again is a very commonly asked question in the form of flowcharts as to how the hormones are being involved. So the outcome of spermatogenesis is that we will have 4 functional sperms coming from one single spermatogonium. Okay, now when you look at oogenesis, there are slight differences that you have to remember. Firstly, the spermatogenesis will start only at puberty, but here the oogenesis starts at the embryonic stage itself. Okay, but same process is going to happen, and where it is going to happen? It is going to happen in the ovaries. Okay, so inside the ovaries we have the oogonium, which will differentiate and it will form the primary oocyte. Now this happens in the embryonic stage itself. Now this primary oocyte will start the meiosis and immediately get arrested at prophase 1. Okay, and it will wait until the puberty. Once puberty comes, there the primary oocyte will first undergo the meiosis 1 and produce what we call as the secondary oocyte. Same, there also after meiosis 1 we called it the secondary spermatocyte. So here it is a secondary oocyte. Now after releasing the secondary oocyte, it's important to note that from the primary oocyte, okay, we have one big secondary oocyte and one small polar body that does not have any cytoplasm, any nourishment. Okay, so this polar body is released just for the sake of it, because I want to retain all the bulk of the cytoplasm in the single cell. Okay, now this secondary oocyte again starts the meiosis 2 but stops at metaphase 2. Only when the fertilization will take place, it will complete this meiosis 2 and become a complete ovum and release the second polar body. So second division also happens unequal only. So we have one big ovum and a small polar body. Clear? So why am I holding on to the entire cytoplasm? Because once the zygote is formed, I have to nourish it until the time it will get implanted. Clear, everybody? Now the secondary oocyte is going to be haploid, okay, when it is released, and the ova is also going to be haploid only. Now who are the hormones that are involved? Definitely FSH, LH, estrogens, but you will understand this when I'm talking about the menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle is all about how these hormones work, so we will discuss there. So as an outcome, we can see that there is one ovum that is produced and two polar bodies. Now how, ma'am, three polar bodies? Sometimes this polar body also can differentiate into two more polar bodies. So as a result, instead of 4 equal cells, we have one big ovum and 3 small polar bodies. Clear, everybody? Now this is the process of gametogenesis. So seminiferous tubules diagram you can remember, and you can show all the different stages of spermatogenesis over here. So please refer to your textbook and practice this diagram. And this is also extremely important, which will show you which cells are haploid, which cells are diploid, and at what stage all of these are happening. Okay, so this is very, very important. Now when you look at the structure of the sperm, from a spermatid, it develops into a mature spermatozoa. So what are the parts that the spermatozoa has? Firstly, there is a head which will contain the nucleus, which is the main genetic material, along with a cap called as the acrosome. Okay, now this acrosome has a lot of enzymes that is used during the fertilization process. Then there is a neck region. So neck region will have centrioles and will connect to the middle piece. Now the middle piece is the main place where the mitochondria is present. So all the way from the female's reproductive tract to the fallopian tube, if it has to swim and go, then it has to have a lot of energy which this mitochondria is going to produce. Okay. Then there is a tail which will help the sperm in swimming, helps in motility. Clear? This is the mature structure of the sperm. You can practice this diagram as well. Very simple: head, nucleus, acrosome. Then we have the neck with the centrioles. Then middle piece with the mitochondria, spiral mitochondria. Then we have a tail which is helping in swimming. Okay, so if you can mark all these parts and you are able to explain, then the entire section is complete. Clear, everybody? So for all these notes, you can scan this particular QR and you can get all these handwritten notes for free, guys. So like you are seeing, just within about 6 to 7 slides, we have completed everything until the gametogenesis. Clear? Now we are looking into how the ovarian follicles will function. So firstly, the primary oocyte is going to be surrounded by one layer of granulosa cells called as the primary follicle or a primordial follicle. Okay, so just a single layer. From there, what happens is it forms the primordial follicle, develops into a primary follicle. Then more layer of cells will come around it, and then it will form a layer called as theca around it. That's what marks the secondary follicle. Now from there what happens is this theca will differentiate into a theca externa, theca interna, and there will be a small gap, a small water fluid filled cavity that is formed called the antrum. So this marks the tertiary follicle, and once you see the antrum, you know that the tertiary follicle now has a secondary oocyte and the meiosis 1 is complete. Okay, now further granulosa cells will work. They will mature to what we call the Graafian follicle, and this Graafian follicle will rupture and cause the ovulation to take place. Clear everybody? So you can see here that the primary follicle is here. It grows, and once we have the tertiary follicle, we know that the meiosis 1 is complete and the secondary oocyte is ready. Now this will mature and the Graafian follicle will release the secondary oocyte out of the body during the ovulation. Now every month the endometrium also undergoes changes, and every month there is a oocyte that will grow, rupture and release the egg. So this particular cycle is known as the menstrual cycle, and it is heavily regulated by the hormones. Okay, so let's see how exactly it happens. So firstly we have the menstruation phase. So in the menstruation phase, the endometrium is going to break down all the layers that we made. Everything is going to break down and a new cycle will start. Second phase is the follicular phase, where the follicle will now start developing. Now around the follicle we have the granulosa cells. So these granulosa cells are going to further release estrogen, which will come and help the uterus to proliferate. So this is also called as the proliferative phase. Okay, now in between the cycle there will be a surge of the FSH as well as the LH, mainly the LH surge, that will cause the ovulation to take place. Okay, now once the ovulation has taken place, the remaining granulosa cells, the fluids, everybody will convert to a structure known as corpus luteum. This corpus luteum is going to release a hormone known as progesterone, and that will lead to further cushioning, further glandular secretions and further nourishment of the endometrium and prepares for the pregnancy. Now in case there is no signal from the new zygote, there is no implantation, nothing is there, then what happens? It is a waste of building this cushion. No, so this corpus luteum is going to break down to what we it will just get regressed and it will break down, and this will lead into the next menstrual phase. So menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, then after that we have the luteal phase, because corpus luteum is there, and because a lot of secretions are taking place, we can call this the secretory phase as well. Okay, now if you look at fertilization, once the release of the semen happens, once the ejaculation has reached the female tract, what happens is it is moving to the fallopian tube. Okay, so within minutes they go to the ampullary region of the fallopian tube, and if at the same time the ovum also releases the fallopian tube, then we have a chance of fertilization. So how fertilization is going to happen? The sperm will first of all release the enzyme, penetrate through the corona radiata. Then around the oocyte we have the zona pellucida. So again all the lysins, all the hyaluronidase will break down these layers and it will come and bind to the zona pellucida. Now once the entry of the sperm is going to happen, immediately no other sperm will be able to enter the cell, and immediately the inside, whoever the secondary oocyte is there, will complete the meiosis and become an ovum. Okay, so this will cause the fusion of the haploid nucleus from the sperm and the ova to fuse, forming the zygote. Okay, now here, since the male configuration is 44 plus XY, there are half the number of sperms carrying 22 plus X, half the number of sperms carrying 22 plus Y. So it is a matter of chance as to which sperm carrying the X or Y chromosome is going to fertilize the egg which has 22 plus X. Okay, so based on which sperm is going to fertilize, the sex of the baby is determined. Now once the zygote is formed, it will start undergoing division. Okay, mitotic divisions will happen, which we call as the cleavage. So 2, 4, 6, 8 cells are formed. So 8 to 16 cells we call as the morula, which is nothing but a group of cells, okay, which is dividing within the same amount of chromosome that the zygote had. Now from there, it's going to differentiate into an outer trophoblast layer and an inner cell mass. So this outer trophoblast layer is going to produce some finger-like projections known as chorionic villi, and this will go attached to the wall of the uterus, and this is called as implantation. The inner cell mass forms the actual embryo. Clear everybody? So once the implantation has happened, so first of all, once this differentiation from the morula has happened, it's ready for the implantation, and once implantation is complete, it will establish the pregnancy. Okay, so this is how the fertilization is taking place. All these diagrams are there in your textbook. So once the blastocyst is there, the blastocyst is going and implanting into the uterine wall, the pregnancy is established. Okay, so this finger-like projections is called as the chorionic villi, and along with this chorionic villi, the maternal tissue, the maternal blood together forms a major organ known as the placenta. So all the kind of nutritious gaseous exchange, everything takes place through the placenta, and this also acts as a endocrine gland. So this releases something called the HCG, okay, and this is the main hormone that will tell the corpus luteum, don't go away and start the next menstrual cycle. The zygote is already here and we have to continue the pregnancy. So this HCG, additionally human placental lactogen, other estrogens, progesterones, everything the placenta is going to release. Okay, then from the placenta we have an umbilical cord, which is the major connection between the embryo and the placenta. So for whatever transport and exchange, this umbilical cord is going to connect the mother to the fetus. Clear everybody? Now if you see, this chorionic gonadotropin is the main one who will indicate the pregnancy and support the corpus luteum in supporting the entire pregnancy. Then we have the HPL, a human placental lactogen, which will support metabolism of the mother as well as the fetal growth. Then also there is progesterones, estrogen, which will maintain the pregnancy, support the endometrium and help the fetus in growing. Now also we have relaxin, which is a hormone produced later in the pregnancy to relax muscles and tissues so that parturition can take place. Then during the entire pregnancy we have cortisols, prolactins, thyroxins, everything supporting all the metabolic changes in the mother. Okay everybody, now once the blastocyst has been implanted, the inner cell mass undergoes certain differentiation. Okay, what kind of differentiation? It will differentiate into layers called as the ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm, from which organs will be formed, from which each part of the embryo will be formed. So if you see the entire pregnancy, in the first month there is the heart that will be formed. By the second month, you have limbs and digits. By the third month, the external genitalia as well as all the organs are already well formed. Okay. Then the fifth month, there is some movements and hair starts appearing. By the sixth month or the end of second trimester, you can see eyelids, eyelashes, okay, and fine hair on the body also that is forming. Okay. And by the ninth month, the baby is completely ready for the birth process. Clear everybody? Now once this is complete, okay, what happens is we go into the parturition. Now how parturition is going to take place? Firstly, we have the fetal ejection reflex that will take place. So the fetal ejection reflex involves the fetus and the placenta giving out little contractions. Now looking at this contraction, what will happen? Oxytocin will release from the posterior pituitary of the mother. Okay. Now once the little bit of a reflex come from the fetus and the placenta, a little contraction is seen, oxytocin will come. Seeing oxytocin, more contractions are produced. Okay. So there is mild contraction here. Now from there what happens? More contractions are produced. Now more contraction will cause more oxytocin will cause more contraction, and together this will lead to parturition or childbirth through the birth canal of the mother. Clear everybody? Now once parturition takes place, this oxytocin also is the milk ejecting hormone. Okay, so the prolactin and everybody has already stimulated the mammary glands to produce milk. But once the parturition is complete, oxytocin will allow the milk ejection to take place, and this release of milk is what we call as lactation. Okay, so this lactation, this mother's milk, the first milk is known as the colostrum, and it is very high in IgA antibodies. It gives immunity to the child and it will take care of the child in the initial days. And this particular secretion from the mammary gland is a very unique feature of all female mammals. Clear? Clear everybody? So with this, the entire human reproduction chapter is complete and we have revised all the important points, everybody. So definitely do scan this QR code and get your free handwritten notes here. So like you all saw, within about 25 pages, we have completed the entire chapter with all the important points, all tabulated columns, flowcharts, diagrams and everything that you need to know. So before your exam, this will be truly very useful for all of you. So definitely do join our community and get your notes ASAP. Okay, so see you all in the next class, guys. Take care. Bye bye.